Hello there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Al24 News streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. The 19th of March 1962, 60 years now, a remarkable date recaps the Algerian diplomacy success, signing Evian agreements to put an end for 132 battling years against the French colonialism, paving the whole world to recognize Algeria as an independent country. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zeninski says hundreds who sheltered in a theater at Mariupol are still trapped, and more than 2 million refugees have now crossed into Poland. Russian forces pressed the assault on Ukrainian cities Friday with new missile strikes and challenging on the edge of the capital Kiev, as well as the western city of Lviv. Starting our news with the remarkable day, 19th of March, Evian Accords, a starting point for a new era after great sacrifices followed by difficult negotiations that culminated in signing the agreements between the Provisional Government of the Republic of Algeria and French colonialism on 18th March 1962. The advisor of President of the Republic for Archive and National Memory, Abdelmajid Sheikhi, said that the Evian documents was an implementation of the principles and goals set in the proclamation of the 1st November 1954, namely the recovery of national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity of the Algerian people. On such glorious day, and according to the clauses of the Evian Accords between the Provisional Government of the Algerian Republic and France, March 19, 1962, witnessed the date of the ceasefire across the whole Algerian territory, which paved the way for Algeria to win its independence officially on July 5, 1962. Islam Seed.
60 years have been passed since Algeria won independence from France after more than 130 years of French colonial occupation in Algeria. On March 18, 1962, the Provisional Government of the Algerian Republic and France signed the Evian Accords, which required the ceasefire agreement. On 19 March 1962, Mr. Youssef Ben Khad, the head of the interim government of the Algerian Republic back then, gave a speech to the Algerian nation announcing the ceasefire on the entire Algerian soil as a first step which led to the independence of Algeria on July 5, 1962. In a message marking the Victory Day, March 19th, President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune said Friday that the crimes of French colonialism against Algerian people cannot fall into oblivion nor be extinguished by prescription.
On this memorable day, a prelude to the victory, the Algerian people have shown strength and determination to face the impact of a large-scale destruction, a violent massive destruction that had shown the heinous crimes of colonialism and that cannot fall into oblivion nor extinguished by prescription.
The memory activism of Pied Noir and Harkis groups has fiercely rejected the 19th March as a commemorative date on the basis that it raises the many dead following the outbreaks of violence in Algeria after the Evian Accords. Algerians who participate in the Evian Accords have shown a sense of diplomacy, an unwavering determination stemming from their unwavering faith in the legitimacy of the Algerian cause. The leaders of the National Liberation Revolution have set themselves an eminent objective when they decided to conduct negotiations with France despite struggles by French diplomats. But thanks to the supreme determination of the Algerian negotiators, their keen sense of diplomacy and their skills in dialogue, the French side had to sit down at the negotiating table and accept all conditions.
Moving on now to the latest updates over Ukraine-Russia conflict. 9 people were killed and 17 wounded in shelling of the suburbs of the city of Zaporizhzhia in southern Ukraine on Friday. Deputy Mayor Anatoly Kortiev said on Saturday, the United Nations and its partners in Ukraine completed the first convoy of urgent humanitarian aid to the city of Sumy in the northeast, one of the most affected areas in the country. At least 860 civilians have been killed and 1,333 injured in Ukraine since the beginning of the war, according to the United Nations, which says that true number is likely much higher. Hundreds of civilians are believed to have taken refuge at the theater as the Russian siege of Mariupol continues. The coastal city has been bombarded by Russian military for weeks, trapping hundreds of thousands of residents. According to Ukrainian government, 2,500 civilians have perished as a result of the battle. On the 23rd day of the Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, hundreds of people are still under the rubble of theater bombed by Russian forces in Mariupol, in the southeast of the country. According to the Ukrainian president in Lviv, a large western city until now spared Russian missiles talk. Why Westerns are trying to further increase the pressure on Russia. Russian Defense Ministry says that used Kinjal hypersonic missiles yesterday to destroy underground weapons warehouse in western Ukraine.
The armed forces of the Russian Federation continue to carry out a special military operation. On March 18, the Kinjal aviation complex with its hypersonic ballistic missiles destroyed a large underground warehouse of missiles and ammunition of the Ukrainian Army Aviation in the locality of Delgatin in the Ivano-Frankivsk region.
Some of the fierce fighting has been in eastern Ukraine, where many soldiers have died. Funerals have been held for more than 20 troops, especially in Dnipro, where most of the soldiers are young. Hussein Berkan and follow.
The Russian special military operation in Ukraine is still going. Hundreds of soldiers have fallen in the battlefield. Soldiers with stories and families who mourned them this morning in the eastern city of Dnipro, which witnessed the fiercest of battles. Some Ukrainian soldiers shared their testimony about the atrocities they have seen these past weeks.
I've joined this unit recently. It's an honor for me. It's part of my family, and today the man was snatched away from our military family. We are very deeply hurt. We feel emotional. He gave his life for our country. May he rest in peace. He will always be remembered. May God take him to a better place, because it's a holy deed. When one sacrifices himself for his country, he is a martyr.
Alexei Zabgorodnikov, Ukrainian officer, expressed his sorrow for the fallen soldiers who are mostly young, and affirmed that this just sparked the fire of revenge instead of pushing toward the escalation.
Most of these soldiers of Walnut Vaca, most of them were brought here from there. Unfortunately, some of them were very young. I'm sorry, it's very difficult for me, but very young men have died while protecting Ukraine, protecting all of us. All we can think of is revenge. Avenging our men. This gives us motivation to protect our country. It's the only way.
The Russian military operation is now in its fourth week. Russian troops have not yet taken over Kiev, a major objective on their hope of forcing a settlement or dictating Ukraine's future political alignments.
At Moscow's big Luzhniki Stadium, tens of thousands of people took part in ultra-patriotic protests, many donned a Z-shaped ribbon, which has become a symbol of Russian support for the Ukrainian army. The gathering was anti-Western and nostalgic for the Soviet Union, as Russian officials tried to boost patriotism in the wake of the heavy international sanctions over Putin's Ukraine campaign. Both Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden held a 110 minutes video call where both presidents had direct talks for the first time since November. A White House readout of the call stressed that Biden made clear that implications and consequences if China aligns with Russia and provides it with material support. A readout from China described the call as constructive, a word that Biden administration did not use.
China to align with Russia, or to, the movement of them to align with Russia, or their proximity of moving closer together, is certainly of great concern to us, as we have expressed, and we are not the only country that has expressed that concern, including many other members of the G7 have expressed exactly that concern. So this is part of the discussion. It has been an ongoing part of the discussion. Expect it certainly would be when the president goes to Europe next week.
The Ukrainian President Vladimir Zeninski has called for meaningful peace and security talks without delay with Moscow as Ukrainian cities face a humanitarian crisis. Let's hear it.
We have always insisted on negotiations. We have always offered dialogue, offered solutions for peace, not just for the 23 days of invasion. And I want everyone to hear me now, especially in Moscow. It's time to meet, it's time to talk, it's time to restore territorial integrity and justice for Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday accused Kiev of war crimes in a call with French counterpart, saying that Moscow was doing everything possible to avoid civilian deaths in Ukraine. The Kremlin said of the call between Putin and Emmanuel Macron, attention was drawn to the numerous war crimes committed daily by the Ukrainian security forces. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zeninski will address the French Parliament on Wednesday as a pressure efforts to secure international help for his country. Last Thursday, Zeninski addressed the German Bundestag and made a direct appeal to Chancellor Olaf Scholz to cut Berlin's strong energy and business ties with Moscow. Zeninski has also addressed lawmakers in Britain, Canada, and the European Parliament, as well as the US Congress. 2 COVID-19 deaths have been reported in China, the first since January 2021, as the country fights its largest outbreak in 2 years, fueled by a surge in the highly transmissible Omicron strain. Isnamsi.
As the government fights an Omicron-fueled uptick, on Saturday, China's national health authorities announced 2 COVID-19 deaths, marking the first time the death toll has risen since January 2021. Both deaths, which occurred in northeastern Jilin province, increased the total number of the coronavirus deaths in China to 4,638. On Saturday, China reported 2,157 new COVID-19 cases from community transmission, the majority of which were in Jilin. People are requesting permission from police to cross borders, and the province has imposed a travel embargo. China has sustained to carry out a successful zero-COVID strategy since the early outbreak in Wuhan. The strategy focuses on mass testing and strict lockdowns, with residents banned from leaving their homes until all new cases are either found in quarantine or through contact tracing. In fact, this has meant that the virus has caused relatively few infections in the country, because clusters are quashed as soon as they are found. The method has gained widespread support and has prevented the enormous number of deaths witnessed in other countries, many of which have begun to abandon any form of social separation. Officials in China have pledged to double down on zero-tolerance stance to contain the current outbreak, which is the country's worst since late 2019. On Thursday, however, China's leader Xi Jinping recognized for the first time the cost of the measure, stating that in combating the virus, China should seek maximum effect and minimal cost. Mainland China's COVID-19 data is counted separately from that in Hong Kong, which is a special administrative region in China and is facing a much larger outbreak with a higher death toll.
Belgium has decided to postpone its nuclear phase-out schedule for 2025 by 10 years, worried about soaring energy prices due to the Russian military operation in Ukraine.
It was important that the federal government showed this political act of the will to be able to extend 2 reactors for a period of 10 years. What is important for our consumers is that the electricity is there in an affordable way, and by doing the rerun, as we call it, we are absolutely sure that in any circumstance security of supply can be guaranteed.
The Council of Ministers was held on Friday in Rome with the rise in energy prices on the agenda. Italian Council President Mario Draghi presented the measures, in particular the taxation of part of the profits from the rise the cost of raw materials to redistribute them to businesses and families which face greater difficulties. Let's have a listen.
We are going to tax some of the extraordinary profits that producers make from rising raw material costs. And we are going to redistribute this money to businesses and families in great difficulty.
In Lviv, residents lined up 109 empty strollers to symbolize the children who had died since the start of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Arranged in row, 109 strollers and baskets of babies were lined up in Lviv's Market Square on Friday, an action from inhabitants of the western Ukrainian city in the Western Mall. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad traveled to United Arab Emirates on Friday for his first visit to an Arab country since the start of the conflict in 2011 that ravaged his country. The Syrian president's ban from the Arab world for a decade was received by de facto leader of the Emirates, Crown Prince Abu Dhabi Mohammed bin Zayed, to discuss brotherly relations between the two countries, according to Emirati official agency ONE. The UNSC adopted a resolution to secure its presence in Afghanistan, whose Taliban government remains unrecognized by the international community. Mrimzian.
7 months after Afghanistan's fall to the Taliban, the United Nations Security Council on Thursday renewed the mandate on the UN Special Political Mission in the country. The United Nations Security Council resolution to secure its presence in Afghanistan spells out a new one-year mandate for the UN political mission in Afghanistan. The mission will focus on coordinating the provision of humanitarian assistance, providing outreach for dialogue, and promoting good governance and the rule of law. Other tasks include promoting human rights, supporting and promoting gender equality. Norway ambassador, penholder of the resolution, said the text sends a clear message that the Council stands firmly behind the Afghan people.
Today, the Security Council will be able to renew the mandate of UN's presence in Afghanistan. As we all know, the situation in Afghanistan continues to be challenging on all fronts. And if adopted today, this resolution, it will send a very strong signal that the UN is firmly, strongly behind UN's continued presence in Afghanistan.
All members of the Security Council agree that Afghanistan needs the UN's help to avoid an economic collapse and a humanitarian catastrophe.
Current situation in Ukraine has forced Ukrainians to flee from their country. In 4 weeks, 3 million people have so far left Ukraine, with the majority crossing into Poland. Some have moved on the other countries in the EU, although the majority are believed to be still in Poland.
In 3 weeks, Ukraine has become among the world's worst refugee crises. According to the UN Refugee Agency, around 3 million people have left Ukraine since the beginning of the conflict last month. The lion's share has gone to Poland, where the number of refugees that have arrived, about 1.8 million, which matches the population of the city of Warsaw, Poland's capital and the country's largest city. As each day passes, thousands more people arrived by train, seeking shelter in the main cities of Warsaw, Krakow and Wrocław.
So in my city it's a difficult situation, but not as like in Kiev, Kharkov, little bit lighter, but it's also they come, they bomb and something like.
Refugees arriving to the Polish capital are mainly being accommodated in private residences, as well as 2 large sports arenas. Other thousands of refugees have decided that their journey wouldn't end in Poland and decided to go to Sweden. Sweden's migration agency says the country expects to receive 76,000 Ukrainian refugees in the coming months, in the wake of the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine.
To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main top stories. "19th of March 1962, 60 years now, a remarkable date recaps the Algerian diplomacy success, signing Evian agreements to put an end for 132 battling years against the French colonialism, paving the whole world to recognize Algeria as an independent country. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zeninski says hundreds who sheltered in a theater in Mariupol are still trapped, and more than 2 million refugees have now crossed into Poland. Russian forces pressed the assault on Ukraine cities Friday, with the new missile strikes and shelling on the edge of the capital Kiev, as well as the western city of Lviv. That's all the news we have got so far for now. Stay tuned for further information. Have a blessed evening.